Hello tankers and tankettes, and welcome to, oh dear, an artillery replay. But it's new artillery, so that makes it fine, right? Well, I'm sure there are some people out there that will hate artillery regardless, but I picked this one out because I wanted to talk about artillery a little bit more, because we've had longer to live with it now since I did the CGC video, what, 2 weeks ago? 2 and a bit? Something like that. It was before I did the Supporter Spotlight week anyway. So, yeah, just even a couple of weeks in, and already I can definitively say I really prefer artillery as it is now to how it was then. It can still be really annoying sometimes, especially if there are 3 artillery and they're all using XVM to focus you, or even just not using XVM, they all just happen to be firing at you. That can still be pretty vexatious. But overall, as a general change, I think it's working more or less. That's not to say there aren't maybe some tweaks that could still be made to the new style artillery, but overall I think this has been a somewhat successful change. Now I know there will be some people who disagree, there will be some people who even want the old style arty back, but I suspect a majority are at least okay with the artillery changes. And I have noticed overall people just, I'm not going to say playing more aggressively, but in matches where there are artillery, people are noticeably being less hesitant than they would have before, because being hit by artillery doesn't have that potential for instant death anymore. You're not going to, like that T-30 for instance, being hit by even a tier 7 artillery, a penetrating HE shell into the side armour or the deck armour of the T-30 could do a hell of a lot of damage, or even just one-shot him. He can now sit there with confidence and know that that's not going to happen. He's not going to lose 1,000+ hit points from an artillery shell. And so I think it's freed up maps generally. Like, artillery isn't this killjoy factor anymore, and so just on that basis alone I would consider it a success. This is Virgil29, by the way. I should say that. He's actually, I think he was in Circ 2. He's an ex-circling anyway. I mean, he's someone that took a break from World of Tanks and has actually come back, so naturally he was curious about the changes to artillery, and so took out his M12, and this match is the result. Now there's going to be something specific about this match, which is something that has changed about artillery. I guess you could say it's the meta that's changed, or potentially, and I think this is going to be a bit of an edge case this particular game. But of course, with artillery now in particular being faster firing and able to get a larger splash radius, and also faster aiming as well, because let's not forget that that's a big factor. Of course, that's going to have a knock-on effect. Now, there isn't extra ammunition to go with that. I don't think any of the artillery got extra ammo, so the fact they can now shoot faster, artillery players are still going to have to be careful about their shells. I mean, there are some of the Russian artillery in particular that don't carry a lot of ammo, and so they can now potentially run out even quicker. Also, say goodbye, enemy artillery. It is still possible to one-shot things, but they have to be quite low health. Of course, artillery doesn't have a lot of hit points, so artillery can still one-hit artillery. That was one of the thoughts I had, actually, is maybe one of the minor tweaks you could make to arty is that artillery does more damage to artillery, that people would then have a reason to try and pick out other artillery to hit as opposed to other tanks. So that T-29, again, with an old style tier 7 artillery, that could have been really nasty, and instead it was 200 hit points and he got tracked and he had the stun effect. Now 200 hit points is not nothing, but if you're having to fire over and over again for 200 hit points each time, you almost have to play artillery differently. You almost have to be thinking more about hitting people where they will be tracked in front of your teammates and that kind of thing. Like, artillery like artillery players aren't necessarily going to have a different mindset yet, but I think at least some people will. And so that's how you're going to get good results in artillery now, is through assistance damage and through the new stun damage bonus, like the second assistance damage effectively. So that's his second kill. Both of the kills so far have been low health tanks, and his team generally, they're starting to run down on hit points, and so the enemy team. This has been quite a close one, in fact. Now my guess, by the way, is that Virgil doesn't use XVM, and he's doing what I would consider to be the correct thing, in that he's playing the map, he's playing what his team is doing. He's not playing by the stats of the enemy team and just focusing one enemy player over and over and over to the exclusion of everything else that's going on. Which, I mean, on the face of it, trying to knock out the best enemy player, you can see why someone would do that, but I don't think it's a good way to play, because it basically ignores the entire tactical situation of the map, so you can just like tunnel vision on one particular person. So I still think that's a bad way to play artillery, and it just annoys the person that you're hitting over and over again. So there's a third kill, again low health. You're starting to see a pattern here. Yeah, so I mean, his team, they've not played badly, I don't think, and he did try to help on the 9-0 line, but ultimately his teammates there were overcome. And although it's relatively even on numbers, his team are, I mean they've been forced into a rather defensive posture. They are probably going to be able to defend that side. And there's another low health kill. So if they can just not lose these low health tanks themselves, they can maybe do this. But there are some particularly dangerous machines still left alive on the enemy team. The T-49 in particular, who is using the 90mm gun, not the derp gun, and the Waffenträger. And we don't know what gun he's using yet. It could be the big, somewhat derpy 150cm, 15cm even. 150cm would be quite impressive. And or he could be using the other one, which I forget. Anyway, so yeah, those are both fairly nasty. I mean, the STA-2 is actually a decent tank, and of course the 122-44 has got that mobility and that DPM. And if he's using premium shells, well, the only thing left with any armor he might struggle with is the IS-3, but the IS-3 is on low enough health that he could just load an HE potentially. So Virgil needs the spotting. One thing Virgil hasn't done, by the way, and it's something that, again, this is maybe a thing artillery players aren't, a lot of them, in the habit of doing, but they need to now be more in the habit of doing, is marking targets and marking where he's going to be firing. Because, you know, people don't magically know your intentions, and especially these days when it's so much easier to splash and stun your allies, when you're taking those kind of shots where there's the risk of that happening, you absolutely have to mark what you're actually firing at. Maybe the game should even just do that automatically. When you know, at least click the button to fire, the game flags up that you're firing at that spot, and it's not going to give people a lot of warning, but it's not then relying on people indicating beforehand, because a lot of players, even though they know they should, don't, or maybe they don't even realize that they should. But yeah, these days it's just like so important, because stunning your allies could be absolutely fatal. So there's the Waffenträger, who's been, of course, sitting at the back for quite a long time and is now finally forced to move. Unfortunately, we've just lost our remaining light tank, the 1390, who's been taken out by the 122-44, who is also still full health, but doesn't have that many hit points. The thing is, though, of these remaining two tanks, even if he gets a direct hit on the Waffenträger, it's still going to take multiple hits from his current hit points, whereas with old artillery, with this tier 7 arty, it would have almost certainly been a one-shot with a direct hit. So we'll see if he manages that or not. And the 122-44 definitely will take multiple hits. So they're a bit spread out and split up, and he's just waiting for spotting at the moment. I think the Challenger's the only thing with any real health left. I'm not sure about the T-34-100 though, or the /100 rather, but I don't think he's got a lot of hit points either. I don't think we get a direct view of him during this match. So it's a little bit tense because they've got them outnumbered, but that Waffenträger in particular has maybe a very nasty gun. And so if they play this wrong, they could easily lose, and they've just lost the T-34-100. So that's not good. That's not one afford they can one they can afford to lose even. So there we go. He gets. I think that was a. I think it was a hit, but if it wasn't a hit, it was a very close splash. 700 damage is pretty good these days, but as I said with the old Artie, that wouldn't have happened. That would have been a lot more damage than that. So the Waffenträger's down to now 25. A splash will do it, but he only takes the track off. The Challenger, I mean, we know now that this guy has the not 15cm gun. I forget what one that is now. The 128, there we go. I had to think about that. But that just meant that, you know, the Challenger was going to be a two-shot kill either way. So will this Waffenträger get away? I'm going to be pretty bad if he does. But fortunately, this time the shell is just close enough to splash his last 25 health away. And that just leaves the 122-44 left. And a very, very low health IS-3. So this is pretty close. Pretty close indeed. That was a top gun, by the way, for Virgil, with only just over 2,000 hit points of damage done. It's a pretty cheap top gun, all things considered. I mean, the damage isn't that bad, but that's more within the range of, say, a tier 7 heavy tank. And I think that's the thing that the people that really didn't like the artillery changes, that are artillery players themselves, that they can have all these hits and get the same amount of damage as a oh, that was way too much lead. Get the same amount of damage as a, you know, a heavy tank or a medium tank or something. Whereas before, of course, they're used to having these really big numbers. Except the really big numbers were super unreliable, and these days you can get that damage just a bit more reliably. Now the IS-3 is in trouble. That might even have been an HE shell, but the IS-3 crucially got in a hit on the 122-44, and that lets Virgil once again take a low health kill. So yes, this one was a bit of an edge case, and what I mean by that is that there were a lot of low health enemies that Virgil could take out. So 2,600, nearly 2,700 damage is I think pretty respectable these days for an artillery piece. But it was that 7 kills that got him the top of the team, and I think that's a thing that artillery is now particularly good at, and maybe particularly dangerous for, is in that late game when there are a lot of players running around with low health. And so the fact that you can do less damage doesn't matter. It's the fact that you can fire faster and aim faster and you have more splash that matters. So it changes the nature of artillery, and this is something I didn't even really consider when I was first thinking about how the play style of Artie would change, how the meta would change. But you know, you think about it and it makes sense. And I don't think you'll have games that are quite this extreme that often, where it's just low health kill after low health kill after low health kill. But it means that artillery surviving through into the late game, when they can start just picking off the low health enemies with bigger splashes, yeah, they could be game changers in a way that they weren't before. Because we've all seen the replays where with the old artillery, where it comes down to, you know, there's just 1 or 2 enemies and you've got somebody spotting for you, and you try and take the shot, and then RNG just says nope, and then you have to wait like 40 seconds, and then, you know, the game comes down to literally a roll of the dice of artillery RNG, and that's just so much less the case these days. There is still RNG, shots can still land far away enough to do no damage, but there's now a much better chance that you'll be able to at least reload in time to have an effect on the outcome of the match. So from that point of view, I think artillery players have more agency than they used to, but it does mean that matches like that, where there's a lot of low health people running around and an artillery firing at them, that might almost make it return to the old style hiding behind buildings, because if you go out in the open, you might just get picked off because you're low health. So it hasn't changed in that way. It's just it kind of changes the nature of how dangerous artillery is and when it is dangerous in a match, if that makes any sense. Anyway, this was probably a bit rambling, and I'm not sure it was entirely as cleanly laid out as it might have been, but it was just a thought I had watching this replay and thinking about some of the other games I've had. You know, there's not been any examples this extreme, but as Virgil has proved, it can happen. You can get a game where you kill half the enemy team with those low health kills and effectively end up winning the game. Anyway, so hopefully you found this video interesting, and if you have, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.